Here's the thing. Where has the myth of white privilege come from? I don't know when the phrase was first used. And I would imagine it's all kind of tied up with kind of unconscious bias training and critical race theory, all of this kind of stuff. I'm not sure when it was first thrown out there, but somebody at some point said, let's throw out the word white privilege, and it sort of stuck. A load of people jumped on top of this and thought, hey, this is well, stick with this. You look at the hysteria around this subject now of white privilege. I mean, it's kind of out of control. So much so that it's sort of just been adopted as it's accepted. Because everyone's too, apart from here on Talk Radio, everyone's too scared to kind of argue against it in any sort of sense. I mean, this one's an absolute beauty, and it centres around Robert Peston, the political bigwig from ITV, previously, of course, the BBC and the Financial Times and various other places, as he would say. And there is no doubt this man probably did the groundwork to carve out a career as a successful economic journalist. Started working in the city, then moved into newspapers, economic journalist in the early 80s. He's the son of a Labour peer. His dad was an economist, so he sort of, I guess, followed that route. And as if I need to tell you, he went to Oxford University. But in fairness, he knows his way around a newsroom, and nobody's going to take that away from him. Now, Peston gave an interview this week on a podcast. It's the Fee and Jane podcast, isn't it? Fee Glover and Jane Garvey, which is getting a lot of momentum, in which he said something so extraordinary, I had to listen to it twice. He said, I just listened to this. So this is Robert Peston. He said, every day he keeps his job as a white middle-class man is a bonus. Every day he keeps his job as a white middle-class man is a bonus. So I first read this. It's funny, this is why I had to listen again. I first listened to this, and I thought he was suggesting that people like him don't get employed much these days, which would be true. So I thought here's Peston attacking the wokerati. That's an amazing about turn from the boy Peston. He's done it. I assumed he'd had almost a change of political direction. He was mulling over the injustices of just how hard it is for white males to get recognised today, given the huge and sometimes understandable, but certainly disproportionate push to employ anything or anyone that isn't white. I thought this was a Peston epiphany. It had taken place under the light of a silvery moon. But actually it hadn't. He was wheeling out the same old tired trope that he was privileged, that he was somebody with white privilege. Now, he clearly had a level of privilege with his background and Oxbridge credentials, and not least the aforementioned nobility of his old man. But that ain't a white thing. That's a class thing. These are seismically different things. He went on to say, I'm very fortunate I got my breaks before people noticed the genuine terrible discrimination there is around the place, including the media industry, against women and against people from ethnic minority backgrounds. He says, I wonder truthfully, if I were 30, whether the sort of doors that were open to me then would be open to me today, because the competition, he says, is much more intense. No, mate, it's not about the competition. This is because the race hustlers have moved in, and it appears to have worked a treat on dear old Bobby Preston, who swallowed this whole lie of white privilege. When he first got his big gigs in Fleet Street and on the telly, it wasn't because he was white. It was because his old man was in the House of Lords and he went to Oxford. So yeah, he had connections. It wasn't because of his whiteness that he got employed. But the diversity grifters have taken over the asylum on these things and somehow concocted a lie that white people, as an entire group, have some kind of privilege. Back then, I would no more have got a gig in Peston's world than my mate Mohammed, for obvious reasons. I would have come from a working class background. That wouldn't have been nothing to do with my whiteness. It would have just been the fact that we employ a certain kind. So we have this curious myth that is snaking its way around it's a multi-million-pound industry. Unconscious bias training is the courses are being snapped up by just about every employer, company, corporation or institution in the land. They're all terrified of being accused of being a racist organisation. It's not worth, this is fascinating, isn't it? It's not worth their headache to turn it down. So somebody knocks on the door. Hello, I'm from the Unconscious Bias Training Emporium. Would you like us to train your staff? Because there might be a little bit of racist. We've had a little look around, and it seems there's a lot of racism out there at the moment, and there's no reason for us not to think some of that racism isn't alive and well in your own staff. So we've come from the Unconscious Bias Emporium to put this right. So if you want to sign up on the dotted line, how much is that going to cost me? Oh, it's not a lot. It's like, you know, if you just sign the no, how much is it going to cost? Well, okay, it's £5,000 a person. Sorry, £5,000 a per. Yeah, well, we're doing it in groups of 30, so, and we'll invoice sporadically. So this is a massive industry. All organisations, and instead of the organisation going, do you know what? We're a really happy ship here. We haven't got any racism going on. We really haven't got racism. We have people with lots of different opinions about different things. And you think you're going to somehow brainwash people into your idea of what is an acceptable human being by me paying £5,000 for you to come in and set up an unconscious bias training course. What are you, some kind of madman? But they don't say that. They go, oh, okay, we might be racist. We could be really bad people, and we might have the odd Eugene Terreblanche or Marine Le Pen in our midst. So bring on the unconscious bias, boys and girls. Get your flip charts out. Get your PowerPoints ready, because the Unconscious Bias Emporium team are here to tell you, you dirty racist, that life can be seen and viewed and experienced in a very different way. You've got white privilege. So, and here's the trick of the whole unconscious bias thing. If you say, I don't have this unconscious bias, I'm not racist, or somebody says, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? What? Well, that's your default answer. You can only say that because you've got white privilege. So what kind of Orwellian dodgy conundrum is that? So you've trapped me into a kind of doublespeak thing. What am I supposed to do with that? So if I say we haven't got any racism, you say, well, that's proof that you have racism. This is absolutely bonkers. And then the critical race theorist fans are out there fueling the whole thing nicely to keep the myth going. And so over there at the BBC, of all places, they've kind of swallowed this hogwash. Hook, line, and in fact, can you just shine some light on this for me? If I ask the question like this, where has this white privilege thing come from? Where has this myth come from? 0344 499 1000. BBC staff have been offered an allyship test which identifies whether they are more privileged than their colleagues as part of diversity training. The resource is called the Ally Track. It begins with an online game where 10 players line up on a racetrack and answer 20 questions. The first to reach the final line enjoys the most advantages in life. Staff are then asked such as, is your player a man? Does your player identify as white? And has your player ever been the only person of their race in the room? Another question says, does your player identify with their gender they were born with? Get in the bin, BBC. At the end of the test, the BBC Creative Allies website, on the BBC Creative Allies website, staff are told that your place in life can be defined by the advantages or disadvantages you are born with in comparison to other people. Well, tough. Sorry. That happens all over the place, doesn't it? You might be better looking, so you'll get on. You might be fitter. You might be smarter. You might be a whole load of things. But the last time I've never worked in a place where somebody said, well, because you're this colour or that gender, you won't get a job. Nobody disputes what happened in the past. But that isn't about white privilege. It's often about the discrimination was in favour of white people because only white people were in those positions. And now we fast forward and we take that as a clear sign that we're all a bunch of rabid racists. 0344 499 1000. Where has the myth of white privilege come from?